Hi, this is Mac with PriceActionTradingSystem.com, and this is our chart lesson for Wednesday, February the 15th. And we had a nice downtrend today. We started out in this trading range for the first hour and a half, 2 hours, but then we broke out of it and failed, and then prices sold off really fast and strongly to the downside. And there's a lot of entries in here that I don't have marked, that I like to stick to the key entry points to show people the major places you want to be looking to enter. And so I only mark the key entry points, especially when we get a lot of entries like this. But there were other entries during the day um, that were good trades. They just were not uh, I like to concentrate on the best. The best trades are the setups that we try to teach the people to take, so that have the highest odds of succeeding. So as you can see, I only circled 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 trades or so, and there were some other good trades down here, but it was too late in the day to be entering a trade. Still would have worked if you took them, but price action works, anytime the market's moving. But when you start entering after 2 o'clock in the afternoon, things happen that won't happen during regular market hours because the volume gets thin. It's like trading in the overnight somewhat, and it's just better to stay out so that you don't get tricked or fooled. And so that's my suggestion. But because of this trading range that kind of started up right at the open, this is basically the open came right in here somewhere on this little down leg move here. Um, and so we had this down sloping trend line coming off the overnight. And that's what I was looking at. And it looked like this was a little wedge pattern that was going to reverse and go higher. But that didn't happen. We broke above this trend line right here and sold off really, really strongly. There was a lot of negative news today, financial reports and so forth, and the market just traded down all day because of that until we kind of hit this strong support point around 1339, which seems to be really strong support this afternoon. So, and we kind of found support all the way down. That's what happened. But eventually prices would work through and then we'd go lower. But let me show you a little trick here. This trend line was very hard to find today. And I've shown this trick before, but let's erase this. A lot of times what you can do is you see I drew my trend line off the lows here. And of course these lows weren't here, but these first two swings were already here. And by the time I found this trend line, we did have this point in here too. So I had drawn a trend line I kind of had this wedge pattern drawn early. And sometimes what you can do is just draw your trend line off the lows and copy it and drag it up to your highs, and you can see that pretty much held prices the rest of the day. You can see that was a great channel right there. And even though we broke out here, we still had two nice legs down to a new low, and it looks like we're trying to stall out. And you can see, and that's exactly where prices stalled yesterday. So this finding support here was no secret because we had it here yesterday as well. And so once we had it here once, when prices came back, it still continues to find support. And that's what happens. Same thing right here. We had a double bottom here with lots of support earlier today. And when right around the open, just after the open, and so when prices come down there again, they find support again, and it takes a little while. And generally when you get in a trading range like this, what will happen is prices will fail out one or both sides before continuing on in another direction. And you can see we traded down into this, and my guess is this is pretty close to a measured move. You see that move right there. You drag it over here, and you see that's pretty close to a measured move where this leg. So you have one leg, a correction, and then a second leg down. And that's all that really is a nice two-legged move. And if you went to a bigger chart, you'd see a two-legged move with probably a couple legs in the middle and then another leg down. And so even on your larger and your smaller picture, always be looking for your two legs, so that will help keep you on the right side. But anyway, we found support here, and so it was no surprise to get support again when we came back here. And this is basically the reason I like this trade right here is we had a two-legged move right here. And if you're not used to looking at this stuff, sometimes it's hard to see, but you can see that's a nice two-legged move, almost a perfect measured move. And if I take the time to draw this just right, it probably is a perfect measured move. You can see that it's a perfect measured move, tick for tick. And the real clue is when we broke above this high right here, failed and came back, and then we broke above this high and only got above it by a tick, and then had this nice bearish bar. So going short right there was a great place to go short, because this is a trading range here, and the trend has been down. This is the first break of the trend line. We got a two-legged move, and so then what we'd expect is a retest, and so that's why I like this short. And I was looking to go short right here, but we never got a setup that was very good. You see, we had too many overlapping bars by the time this one finished, but even if you'd placed your order there, it never triggered, and it went higher again. So be patient, wait on the good setups. If you wait on the good setups, they'll come, and what happens a lot of times is we get antsy and we think we're going to miss a trade, and we see a semi-decent setup that turns out to be nothing but a trap, and all they did was trap the shorts, run up here, run their stops right here, and trap in some new longs, and then they reverse it, and they use all that momentum to drive it down one more time and test this low again. And you can see how price is stalled right here at this double bottom, and they broke it lower just temporarily, and then it bounced out of there. So this was a good setup here, because not only was this a bounce off a double bottom, but now we got a broader double bottom, and there's enough room to scalp out almost before you get back to this EMA, and definitely before you get to this high or this high. So this is a worthwhile trade to take, and if you took it, you can see you could have ridden this all the way back up to the high up here, and we might have had this trend line in place. We may not have, but it doesn't matter, because now we know we've got resistance right here, and when we come up here again, we break slightly higher, and there you got a nice reversal bar. You really needed to go short. I circled that high, but the best short was to wait on this bar right here. But you could have gone short right here, because we did break above this former high and fail, and that's a nice reversal bar that opened up here on almost its high and closed on almost as low. So in this case, it was okay to go short here, because we knew this was a resistance area by the other two reversals over here, actually three, because here's one, here's one, here's one. So we're reversing that same area, and if you moved it up and used your closes right here, that's a failed break above that previous high that failed, and we just ride it back down, hopefully back down to here. But as you see, it stalled. They came back and tested that again. It still couldn't go any higher. And what happens when they test something twice and it fails? That's a double bottom where we already had another support, and they take it higher, and we do break higher here. And of course, you might, like I said, you may not have had that trend line in place there, and that was, but you still had this, and now we would have moved this up to right here. And you see, we stalled there, we broke higher, we tried to go higher a couple of times, but this, you don't want to go short out of this for sure, because there's too many overlapping bars, and there's too big a chance it could fail and make another leg up. So we wait on this little second entry right here, back inside of the highs, and it's okay to go short below that bar, because there was your breakout, prices pulled back, tested the breakout area, and then turned back down again. So that's a breakout pullback short. It's a second entry short as well, and you can see prices, and then it was off to the races down. And hopefully, like I said, use this trick that I showed you. Sometimes you can't find your upper trend line. Try to find it off the low and copy it and drag it up and see what happens. And you might have even moved it up here, but the best thing to do is come all the way back to the start. And you can see how that held prices the rest of the day. I mean, they really had a hard time getting to it, but when they finally did, they turned right back down again. So remember that trick. Or I wouldn't necessarily say it's a trick, but it's just a little secret. It's the way I find a trend line sometimes. Sometimes it gets hard to find a trend line. And the reason you really can't find a trend line here, this trend line was fairly simple to find, but the reason you couldn't find anything going on after that is because it's not really trending in here. It's in a range, and that's another sign. If you're having a hard time finding a trend line, then you know you're in a trading range. And but this was a great setup, and you had another actually chance to enter right here. This is actually, believe it or not, this is a second entry short right here. This is a two-legged pullback to the EMA, and this very hard to see. There's some overlapping bars there, so you may not have taken it, but it still was a good entry. And if you see, we had a low here. We went up. There's your first leg up. We pulled back to right here, and then there's your second leg up. But what happened was it turned lower before it closed, so you don't see that it went up here, but it did, and then it came back down and closed here. And so you could have gone short below that bar right there. At that point, you'd have had 3 overlapping bars, but none of them are really a doji yet. So you need 3 or more overlapping bars and at least one a doji to really consider it a trading range. This is a trading range. This right in here is a trading range. This is a trading range. But anyway, when you start to see a lot of overlapping bars, and also there's another thing here too. We had a little double top with a trap right there when it broke above. So that's another reason that you could have gone short right there. You need the trap or the second entry or a two-legged pullback to the EMA. And while that one's hard to see, if you drop down to a smaller chart, you'd clearly see 2 legs back to the EMA that reversed and gave you a chance to go short. But really, this was not I didn't mark this one because this was not the best entry. The best entry was up here on this breakout pullback short. And then there was really no decent entries. This actually was a breakout pullback short right here. So if you took that, it was okay. I don't have it marked. But let me draw my line on across there. And you see that's off that double bottom. We broke below it. We came back up. So that's kind of a breakout pullback short right there. And it would have been good for a scalp. But this was the real breakout pullback short because this was the line we were holding our closes. And look at that. It broke lower, pulled back, tested it to the tick, and turned back down. So going short right there was okay as well. And you should have had a trend line more than likely down through here as well. And that trend line's another clue because it's bouncing off that trend line down through there as well. So hopefully you can see that. Always draw your trend lines, even your short-term ones, because they're telling you something, and just as well. And you can see that prices were holding on that trend line all the way down. I drew that off those first couple of swings right there, those first few bars, and it held all the way down. And so that would have clued you into this move right here and right here as well. And but notice what happens every time we touch the lower side of this channel. That's when prices reverse. And it may take them a while like it did down here. They tested that line a few times, but notice they never really went a whole lot lower. And then we go to the other side. And same thing here. We touched it down here, then we go to the other side. And we didn't quite get down there here. We didn't quite get up there here. So this was a little tricky. But this is a second entry short right here. This is a second entry short. Here's your first leg up, 2 legs back, and then another leg up to the trend line. And even though this didn't quite get there, that's okay because this trend line's kind of iffy right here. If you drug it down just a little across those closes, then it looks good right there. And this is also a small congestion area, and you got a failed break above it. Anytime you break above a previous high when prices are chopping and ranging, you're generally going to get a failure and a good trade back to the other side. And that's what this is. You got a little double top across here, some congestion. We broke above it, and look how bullish it looks, but then suddenly it's that much bearish all over again, and it's another run down to test this low. So that was a great entry right there. And even though this didn't quite get back to the trend line, this is still a good entry because here's your first leg, your pullback, and then your second leg. So that's a second entry short. Here's your first entry short, pullback, second entry short. That's a second entry short in a downtrending market during a pullback. And there's another couple of clues here that we might break lower. This is usually what I look for. Notice how high we got here, and then we made a lower low. And then this high, look how high. It didn't get anywhere near this high, so the market's getting weaker. And then that looks pretty bearish. We came back down here. And even though we didn't go as low as this one, it bounced off the support area. It tried to go higher. It couldn't go very high. It came a little lower again, tried to go higher, and all it did was fail. And on that second entry, we got a lot. And this is also another congestion area. Look at all these overlapping bars in here. That's congestion. We broke above it. So we're entering with the trend and going short on a failed breakout of a congestion area that we traded down into. And look at that move right there. That is a fantastic move, because what most people thought, this was the low of the day here, or they were looking for a measured leg to come back up in here and test this area right here, maybe test this high again. And so a lot of people got long coming out of that congestion area, and that's why I'm always telling you, don't trade breakouts. Wait on the breakout pullback. If this was going to go higher, the odds are it's going to break out here and pull back and test the EMA or test these closes across here, and then reverse and go higher, and then you get on with it. But don't trade the breakout, because look what happened. We broke lower out of these overlapping bars here. It failed. We broke higher out of those overlapping bars right here. It failed. And that's what's going to happen most of the times, and they'll do it a couple of on each side, and they'll trap people both ways, and then all of a sudden it'll continue back with a trend. And that looks really, really bullish, but all it did was trick people. And but your clue not to go long here was not to get long in all this congestion here. You just don't do it. It's not worth it. Same thing here. This was looking really bullish, but look what happened if you got long and, coming out of this congestion area right in here. That area is congestion. All those overlapping bars and dojis. It's just not a good place to get long. Look, prices broke lower first, trapped everybody on that side, then broke out the top, trapped everybody there, then continued on with a trend. So we're looking to enter with a trend until it's proven that it's over. And we haven't proven that yet. And the main thing is, this is congestion. And while you may not get short right in here, if you get a trap like this, you got to get short. And you see what happened. Prices broke right on down. And then once we touched this trend line, the lower side of the channel, then we headed back to the upper side. And prices didn't reverse again until we got there. This was a pretty stout pullback here, but look what happened. Look at all these overlapping bars. That's congestion. Look what happened. We broke lower here out of this little congestion. It failed. It came up to the top, broke out, failed. Came back down, broke lower, failed. Came back up, failed. Came back down, failed. But this is so then you got a great big congestion, and prices broke out to the top side, and what happened? It failed. And that's what will happen over and over and over, and that's why we do not trade breakouts. Trading breakouts, sure, every now and then prices will break out of a congestion area, and they go and they go and they go and they go. But it'll only work just enough to keep you trying to do it, and most of the time you're just going to lose your money. So if prices are going to continue on, unless it's a really strong trend day, which, this is a pretty good downtrend. So even though we're going into these congestion areas like in here and in here, this is still a pretty good down move from the day. Prices opened, where'd they open? Right in this area, right in here. And we pretty much moved down all day. We were stuck in this trading range to begin with, but that's because we had this this was resistance yesterday, and you see, if you drag your line across here, you can see that was just, now they're trying to test that resistance as support, and it held for a little while, but it couldn't hold enough. It couldn't hold long enough to send prices higher. When prices broke out the top of this little congestion area, they just failed. Looking for this second leg compared to this first. There's actually two legs in this leg, and if you broke this down to a smaller chart, you might see three, or actually you'd probably see four. 1, 2, and then 1, 2. The smaller you break it down, you find more and more legs. But you have to learn to spot this stuff on the larger and the smaller time frame at the same point. So hopefully this makes sense, and it can be complicated on some days. Today was a good trend down, but it was still hard to see if you could not find this trend line down across this highs, and it really was hard to find. But even if you didn't have this, you should have been able to see the ranges and then get your trend lines off the short-term trends. And so there's different ways to find this stuff. Just because that's the way I drew my chart doesn't mean that's the only way to find it. There's other ways to find these same setups. And you can see that right there. And then hopefully you can see this trading range right in here. Sorry, I had an interruption there. Somebody came in the door. But yeah, you should have still found this range again, and you use your range rules, just like we did up here. And then basically once we broke lower, then we just went into another range, this little range right here. And again, you use your range rules, and all this range did once it broke above this area was just go up here and make it a little bit higher. So it's just a little higher range across here for the most part. So draw your support and resistance lines. Always use your trend lines, even on these little short trends like this one right here. Draw your trend line. See there what happened? Prices were following that trend line. They broke it. They came back for the retest, made a new high, tested that line to the tick, and then went lower again. And so I'm always drawing these trend lines, even though you may not see them on my chart after the fact because it gets too cluttered. I'm always drawing them, and there's you another one. Drew it off the first couple of swings there. We broke it. Came back down, tested it, and then reversed. So if you just use your trend lines alone, it will a lot of times keep you on the right side. And they're not always this easy to draw. These are pretty easy to draw, but they're not always this easy to find the trends either. But there's short-term trends just like there's long-term trends. And even though a lot of times, the one thing I will say about a short-term trend is here's a good example here. This one still came back and tested the low of the day. But a lot of times these shorter term trends will break the trend line, come back and actually test the trend line to the tick and reverse, where generally on a bigger trend line like the big one coming down today, when you get a break of it, you're almost always going to get a retest of the previous low and probably a couple of legs down to a new low before you get a reversal. So it really just depends. But the shorter term trend lines you will see more often where they just pull back and test the trend line and then go higher. And that's what happened here, and that probably helped fool a lot of people right here into going long. But all the same, they trapped everybody and they came back down for the retest. And then we had a more protracted correction that looks more like a trading range than it really does a correction. But you can see that the lows were getting higher across here, and the highs were getting a little higher across here until we broke out of this top and trapped everybody, ran all the stops, got all the shorts out, trapped all the new longs in. And so then the shorts that got tricked have to start coming back. They realize they got tricked and they start buying back. And the longs that got in have to cover, so they start selling. And all that selling quickly drives the market lower. And that's what traps are all about. So hopefully that makes sense to you. This has gone a little longer today than I planned. We're into 22 minutes. So I'm going to call it a day. Hopefully you learned something today. Hopefully you had a good trading day as well. If you didn't, hopefully you have a better one tomorrow. This is Mac with PriceActionTradingSystem.com, and we will see you next time.